Good morning, Memorial Drive friends and family. I am joined today by Trent Taylor, who preached for us on Sunday. Man, thank you so much for sharing. That was really a great walk into Advent, a message about joy. I want to start by just for our audience, by way of review, to say, this is what I took away from it. And you are welcome to say, hey, well, that's not what I talked about. But my takeaway was that quote about joy being our inner climate. That helps us when we step into the real world, that inner climate that we get to take into it with us. And that's what joy, I feel like the joy being about was so much more about the presence of God. But that was my takeaway, that I can carry that with me. So what would you say to clean that?
No, I think that's great. And that honestly, that was one of my favorite thoughts from the message, mostly because, so here's one little little insider information here. That was one of the few concepts or ideas that was original to me in that lesson that I didn't steal from someone else.
Yeah.
So that I kind of had ownership of that and thought it was cool myself. But yeah, that was just something I thought of as we went through it. So
I honestly wanted to ask that. Was that like a quote from a book? Because if not, that's like that needs to be written down. Trent Taylor.
Yeah. It's stored on my my hard drive somewhere. So it's down there. But yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway and summary, and just that understanding of what is it that is affecting my inner climate most. What am I allowing to have impact on that the most? It totally unrelated, but so one of our church members had recommended recently that I watched this YouTube video with a guy I've never heard of until now, but a guy named Wim Hof. You ever heard of Wim Hof? No. Well, anyway, he's kind of crazy. He's some Scandinavian guy, and he's got this Wim Hof method of health and breathing techniques and taking cold showers and ice baths and all this stuff. And like his philosophy is you're changing yourself from the inside out, like physiologically. And so I feel like, I don't know whether his stuff's for real or not. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm like, I think that's kind of what we're talking about Sunday, is not changing ourselves physically from the inside out. Although I really do think that these spiritual realities do have physical impact on us, in some ways. And so yeah, your observation there, very, very right.
Have we talked about the nonverbal communication experiment?
I think I've heard you mention it, but I don't remember the details.
The professor took and it was a huge class, like 150 people, and he had half the class put their heads down so they didn't see what the other half was doing. And we rated our joy level and how funny a cartoon was. And the difference between the two groups was one of us were to hold our pen in our mouth like this. and the other half was to hold their pen in the mouth like this.
Huh.
And he said, without fail, because he does this every class, or every class semester, the group like this is more joyful or happy, maybe,
yeah,
and thinks it's funnier. And it's because they have put their face into a smile.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so later on, like decades later, a couple decades later, I am running on a treadmill in a like basement of a hotel, and there's a mirror in front of me, and I hate running, and I was looking at the most unhappy man I've ever seen in my life. And so while I'm running, I started just biting down and trying to make my cheeks touch my ears, or my sides of my mouth touch my ears. And I do that now whenever I run, and it
Yeah.
actually changes how I do or do not look forward to. And if I find myself hating it, then I start making,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not doing that anymore.
I do the same thing on my bike rides. And I kind of, I discovered it by accident one day. I like passed somebody on the trail, and they smiled at me, and that evoked a smile in me. And then I realized, like, immediately that the discomfort felt less.
Uh,
And so I will do that, especially when I get far into a ride where I'm getting tired.
uh-huh.
I'll just force myself to smile, and it certainly helps. Yeah.
Well, I love that idea of changing us from the inside out. The quote was, "Joy is the inner climate." Oh, okay, this is what I wrote down. Joy is the inner climate to navigate storms of life. I feel like you said it cleaner than that. That's my bullet point.
Yeah. I think that's close. And I think my intent was that, um, I mean, honestly, like we're experiencing it this morning. I mean, it's freezing or below freezing cold outside, but I'm really comfortable in my house here, and you're like maybe slightly less comfortable in your garage, but in front of that heater, if the heater wasn't
Right.
there. um so to me, it kind of is that situation that we live all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but so here's another thing that goes back to this crazy Wim Hof guy. And I don't think he has any, I don't know what his spiritual beliefs are, but he also says his philosophy is based on what your dad has said for years. And that is, especially for parents, like, parents, don't protect your kids from difficulty. um, don't be that snowplow, parent that that just clears all hardship out of the way. And that's what he said. He says, let's, expose ourselves to difficulty, expose ourselves to discomfort. And that, he's saying that benefits us physiologically. But I mean, that's what your dad has said for years on a spiritual level, is that, just taking the challenges of life as they come to us, that it benefits us spiritually so much. And I think that ultimately that goes to that James chapter 1 passage, completely.
And I had to open up. Had to open up, James. Okay. So whenever I watch a sermon, yours or Dan's or Jason's, I purposely don't think about this conversation while I'm watching it. So then I go back a second time and watch it, and take notes and think about, all right, what were the main points? Um, and so I'm really questioning my listening skills when I think I'm just absorbing, but that's another topic. Um, but I had to go back and read James 1 because you talk about consider it pure joy when you face many trials. And I was like, what is the context there? Like, what's the therefore, or what's the,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is it, because I thought, is it persecution for being Christians? Is that the context? And it's not there. Like, it is just trials, because this
Yeah.
produces perseverance, and this produces how we want the character that we want to live.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I did not have time to do, and I actually had in my original notes, was to walk on down through James chapter 1 and look at, and really, I think that thought that we see in verse 2 there, 2 and 3, is kind of expanded upon as you walk through that passage. And it talks about, in verse 4, it talks about the patience that is developed and the patience that is required in those trials. And then it talks about asking God for wisdom. I mean, I think that's another challenge when we get in the middle of trials, is then I start trying to figure out, okay, how can I get out of this? And how can I make this better? And then James is saying, okay, wait, let's back up a little bit here and be patient, and then ask God for his wisdom and his perspective on this, because my desire may be, man, how quickly can I get out of this? But that may not be God's intent. And then what I love is it ends up just talking about how God blesses us and how God will really give us great benefit from that moment. Anyway, we didn't have time to walk through all that on Sunday, but when you look at the entirety of it, it becomes both more challenging and more impacting as you see, okay, this is really important.
So when you mention patience, I want to get back to the marshmallow illustration because I thought that was gold. But then the wisdom piece, that it leads to wisdom. And then it says, but don't ask God for wisdom if you're not going to have faith. And I wonder if a piece of that is because for God to give us wisdom, he's not just going to magically give you wisdom. He's actually going to give you trials. And the trials will be what produce wisdom. So don't ask for wisdom if the trial comes and you, how can I get out of this? That same thought.
Yeah, and I think a really interesting correlation, because as I was preparing for, I was looking at a lot of different aspects of happiness and joy, and I was like thinking to myself, okay, where does Scripture talk about happiness? Does it ever promise happiness, or is it just this joy, joy in the midst of trials and difficulty? But in Proverbs 3, it says, "Happy is the man that finds wisdom." So it's kind of a scenario where, okay, if I can allow God to be my joy, and if I'm seeking wisdom in him, then there's where that byproduct of happiness comes in, if I'm relying on his wisdom and not my own. But all of this, I mean, this is not easy stuff. And that's what I mentioned. James 1, 2, and 3 are two of my favorite verses in all of Scripture, and they are two of my most hated verses. Every time I read them, I'm like energized and encouraged, and then I'm like, oh, but because I want that piece of pie without kind of what the calories do to me afterwards, or something.
Yeah,
it's a real challenge.
I get to participate in a ministry that is crazy difficult. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of training, and it is like, I don't know how to describe it, how hard it is. Then on the backside, I don't see anything that blesses like it does. And one of the guys who was leading one time said, hey, because there are a few of us just saying, man, this is so hard. Why do we do this? And he said, be joyful in the fact that this is hard. If it were easy, you wouldn't see the results that you're going to see.
Yeah.
if you didn't have to pay the price you have to pay to do it. And it just feels like, man, that is just a Jesus truth. Um, and
Oh, sure.
it's just in the trial. You can just sit there really comfortably knowing God is in this place.
Yeah. And I think therein lies one of the greatest challenges that we as parents face, especially in the United States, or Western culture, where we have the resources to control some variables of our lives, or at least think we can. Um, and of course, we're going to protect our kids. We we want to protect them from harm and from choices and decisions they could make that could have, you know, lasting impact on their life. But to protect them from every level of discomfort um, has such a detrimental effect later on in
Yeah.
their life. Um, and so it's like you said, we we need to be able to have that perspective of maintaining joy through I mean, goodness, it's so painful to watch our kids struggle. And it's so painful to see them be in pain. But that this may be the greatest challenge of a parent, is to be able to dig deep and find that joy in their discomfort.
Yeah.
And yeah, and just that balance of protection versus preparation. I mean, certainly I want to protect my kid, but I also want to prepare them for the battles that they're going to face later on in life, especially the spiritual battles, which are probably the greatest of all that they'll face.
I think about and and you can't do everything. I mean, that's you can't expose your kids to every possibility. But one of the things that I've thought about that's different from my kids than me growing up is playing sports. They've only once or twice been on team sports, and I think about the value of having some adult yell at you, and I mean, it's horrible, and coaches can be jerks. But I think, what's it like for my kids not to have a really horrible adult in their life? And I think, well, I mean, besides me, but I think, so is that saving them from brokenness that they don't need to endure, or are they going to get a job and just be shocked by the
Yeah.
behavior of adults? Um,
Well,
but
and it depends. It depends on the context, because I think in the context of sports, it's just accepted that a coach yelling at a kid, or a coach pushing a kid really hard
mhm.
beyond their comfort, it's just accepted as character development. Um, Whereas if the youth minister yelled at the kid, then it
Yeah,
would be, honestly, it would be considered abuse. Um, and even as a parent, so if, like, inside my house, if my kid is doing something I don't want them to do, um, then I tell them, I say, hey, don't do that. And I can do that without yelling. If I yelled repeatedly, it would be considered abuse. But yet, if my 3-year-old is in the front yard and I see them walking toward the street, so there it's perfectly acceptable, in fact, expected, but I'm not going to stand on the porch and say, hey, Jimmy, listen, don't do that. Hey,
make a good
Jimmy,
choice.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I'm going to be yelling and screaming, running at them, everything I can to get their attention. So
yeah.
it's very it's very contextually based there, as far as how we understand that.
I don't know how we turned down that road. I don't know what happened there.
Well, and I don't know. And I don't know what that necessarily has to do with anything, except that I think we have to understand how important it is, the way that we parent kids, and the like you said, um, coaches and things, uh,
Yeah,
that.
when
Yeah, go
when
ahead.
we got
Sorry.
to Guadalajara, some good friends, missionaries that had been in Mexico and maybe 10 years, they gave us the book Love and Logic, which is training your kids. Uh, and I'm sure a lot of other parenting books are like this, but it's about consequences, letting your kids live out their own consequences. When you give rules, tell them what the consequences are, and then just letting them live, letting it be natural, a lot of natural consequences, and not rescuing. And Quincy's two, our twins, would be born a year later. But they gave us the book in the context of saying this is the best book on missions that we've ever read. And
Uh,
and you need to look at this church plant in the with the perspective of love and logic, where you train leaders and you let them live out their own consequences and you don't rescue. And a lot of
yeah.
times, what that means is you, as the missionary, look bad, and
Yeah.
and it's true in the States, and it is so hard because I don't want to look like an idiot. I don't want to look unprofessional. I don't want to look like I'm not prepared. Um, but the idea is let people have responsibilities, and then they live out the consequences of it. And so
Yeah.
I just bring that up to say it's not just children, like
Oh, well,
it's in
and
our adult life too.
honestly, when you mentioned, how did we turn down that path? I in the moment I wondered, um, did I steer it toward talking about children as a way of avoiding talking about myself, and of avoiding, okay, this, how does this apply to us as adults, as individuals, um, and uh, and so, yeah, to me that was the focus of the lesson Sunday. It wasn't about parenting at all. It was about, man, how how am I a responsible follower of Jesus, and where do I find myself, numbing my own pain and numbing my own challenges in life. Again, going back to, we live in a culture where we have the resources to affect some of those things, and we have the resources to stave off some of the consequences that we've created for ourselves, some of the pain that we may be facing. So turning it back to me, to us, I wonder where we do those things.
It's incredible to think of our partnership with God in this, that He is the good Father and He
Yeah.
lets us live our consequences. Um, like at so many places, He could step in and go, "Whoa, this is not a good choice." But
Yeah.
it's like, all right, we'll work with that. And
Well, to me, this dovetails perfectly. There's a group of teens right now that we're doing a study on Mere Christianity, the C.S. Lewis book, and the chapter that we walked through just this past week talked about. Um, he talked about people out there, and the issue they take with God's will, and bad things that happen, and the consequences that are in the world, and that people will say, well, how could that be God's will, that this mess over here happens? And C.S. Lewis pointed out, well, here's the situation. It's like a mom, going back to parenting. He said it's like a mom who tells her kids, hey, go clean your room because they're a mess, but yet she wants to give them the free will to do that on their own. And so when they go off and get distracted or choose to disobey, the room is still a mess. So the question is, was that her will, that their room was still a mess? Well, no, that wasn't her will, but her will was that they had the freedom to choose to obey her or not and live with the consequences. And and so that God is the good Father. I mean, is it His will that we suffer pain?
Yeah.
Well, maybe yes and no. I mean, it's his will that we choose well. It's his will that we learn as deeply as possible the spiritual realities of existence. So anyway, it's some challenging things to think about.
I have never done this in the middle of a meeting. I am so cold, and looking at myself on the screen is making me colder. So I've got to find something.
Oh, a beach background or something, or okay.
Yeah, I wish I had beach. We're going to settle for the center of Guadalajara, but I guess it's
That
the cathedral in Guadalajara.
that'll warm your heart then.
I'm hoping it's probably sunny and 75, 80 today there. So looking at that snow in the background, I love that picture, but I'm like feeling like a cold breeze, and I'm sitting in the middle of the garage. There's no breeze in here. But,
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm cold
right.
sitting in my house, so
Yeah. So the marshmallow, something that you said there just made me think of your marshmallow illustration, of the kids that could wait, um, and you didn't say how long they had to wait. They were given one marshmallow.
yeah, 15 minutes is what I read. I just didn't have time
15.
to get into that detail. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're given one and told, if you can wait till I come back, you can have two. And then they mapped those kids' future and saw correlation, at least, between good jobs, high test scores, and the ability to wait.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you saw it or not in the comments. Breton White mentioned, and the way she said it, I can't remember her words, but my takeaway from it was that she's seen that research before.
Yeah.
And there was also a correlation between those kids that could wait. There was a connection with, they trusted the adults in their life.
Yeah, they learned to trust. Yeah, they either a result was that they learned to trust, or the kids that made the correct choice either had trusting relationships.
Yeah, yeah, and so the thought of an adult says, if you can wait, I'll give you two. And so looking at it from the mindset of a child that would either have adults in their life that they trust, that would encourage patience and faith. Whereas if you have parents that fall through on anything, better go ahead and eat that marshmallow now. And the thought of, if we can be patient, that's reflective on, are we trusting God? Or even go back farther to, have we stepped into a relationship with him that would be teaching us that he is safe to trust?
Oh yeah, I think that trust issue that you bring up there is just so huge in so many aspects of our relationship to God, and so what I wonder, with you bringing that up, I wonder if our lack of feeling joy, our lack of being able, and I think of joy as maybe less of a feeling, and again, going back to that, it's more of that inner compass, that inner climate of being able to see past, to see through whatever challenge. And I wonder if our inability to do that is directly related to whether we trust or not. And then two, I wonder if it's also directly related to, how much am I trying to take the reins of this and control this and get myself out? And so, yeah, if I'm trusting in myself, how can I here's a question I hadn't thought about. can I simultaneously trust in myself and God fully? I don't know. I don't even know what correlation that has, but I feel like it's got to be all on Him. Um,
Man, so this is a struggle that I have. Um, when we lived in Mexico and people would say, God's going to keep you safe, you're serving God and He's going to protect you and He's going to protect your family. I would, okay, thank you. But inside, I know God doesn't make that promise. God doesn't say your kids are going to be safe. And I suffer from a little bit of PTSD from worry about kids in Mexico.
yeah.
Like it was major stress. Um, so, so my judgment is, um, mom gets sick. We, we pray that she gets well, but I don't believe that that's a promise of God. Um, so, so I think that's healthy. That I think I have a clear picture of what God does and doesn't promise. But then at the same time, I think that's the healthy part. The unhealthy part is I don't want to trust God. Sometimes I think maybe I don't want to trust God because I don't want to be disappointed. I don't want
Mm.
to be let down by God. And so I'm trying to figure out where am I supposed to be on the spectrum? Where is this is healthy faith, and where is this? God didn't promise that. Like man, I can't think where this is, but there's a verse about you should have confidence in God because He even sacrificed His own Son, and we take it as see how much He loves you, and we take it as so
Yeah.
God's going to protect us. And no, He loved His Son, and He let His Son die. Yes, He loves us, but that doesn't mean He's going to protect us from harm.
Well, so here's I think a big struggle that we have to be really careful with. So we have physical reality and spiritual reality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, over the centuries, there have been a lot of competing views about what are these things, and are they one and the same? Are they two? Are they completely separate things? And so, if you read or if you watch, one of my favorite talks ever, is Rob Bell's, the pseudo heretic guy, that his talk on everything is spiritual. And
Uh-huh.
man, I just eat that up. I think that is one of the best perspectives
Is
on
that the
what.
one you show, like maybe not yearly, but every couple of years to the youth?
Yeah.
Okay.
I show it ever so often, because I just think so good. Um, and so I think we are challenged when we try to separate the two too much, and we try to say, like, okay, like when my father died after months of people praying for him to be healed. Well, if I'm like, okay, well, that's a physical reality, it has nothing to do with the spiritual reality of everything. To me, that's a risk. That's dangerous to do that. um, and then it's also dangerous for me to conflate everything about spiritual or everything about physical reality to God's goodness. So does the fact that my dad died, does that mean God doesn't answer prayer, that He's not a good God? um, it doesn't mean that at all. So and going back to Jesus' death, so here we have the physical reality of Jesus' death, and the pain that surrounded that. I mean, the pain for God and His heart. But yet that physical reality was and is a spiritual reality for us. And so I think we just have to be really cautious, and we have to recognize the interconnection between physical reality and spiritual reality. Um, they are not one and the same, but they're so closely connected that they are difficult to separate, if that makes sense. And I'm talking way above my head here.
Well, it makes sense in that it is so hard to understand. You know,
Yeah.
it's like one of those things where, like Paul talks about, we see vaguely as in a mirror,
Yes.
foggy mirror, and it feels like, yeah, I'm looking, as you're speaking, I'm looking at something that's very true and solid, and I still, like, if I try to reach out and grab it, I'm reaching through a waterfall into what am I actually grabbing a hold of.
Yeah. And so for me, I think going back to James chapter 1, so when I'm in the midst of this painful physical reality, it is very real, it is very difficult, but yet there is a spiritual reality that supersedes it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that's more important than it, or it gives it actually gives perspective to it. It gives value and meaning to it, and so there is a hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
of physical and spiritual reality, but there's also an interplay between them um, that I have to be aware of. Um, anyway, and
This
and again, somebody could come in here, some incredibly brilliant theologian, and explain this, and I would likely still have no better grasp of it.
Well, this reminds me of your concluding verse, Colossians 1:27. The glorious riches is Christ in us, the hope of our glory. And that, man, and this takes us back to Advent, the Emmanuel.
Yeah.
In all of this, we don't know health or sickness. We don't know safety or danger. The only thing we know, Christ is with us. And to the point that we are being transformed into his likeness. I think that's the hope of glory. And that feels like a Christmas card-ish greeting, but I feel like everybody knows they've lived in that at some point. And when they've lived in that, they really have experienced peace more than they could imagine. And they've lived in joy more than they could have hoped for.
Yeah.
But then you get a break from the trial, and that's what you think you've been longing for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's kind of like whenever we'll take the group to Camp Barnabas in the summer. I mean, one of the top 5 experiences of my life, and it's such a hard week, and the whole week, I mean, the whole week is just, it's pure joy. It's not pure happiness and it's not pure fun, but it is pure joy. But the whole week, we're all looking to the end. We're all looking to, man, okay, this is great, but we can't wait till Friday gets there. And then when Friday gets there and we leave, we look back on it like, man, that was so hard, but so good. And that's, it's, and then we can't wait to go back again. And I feel like that's part of the reality we're talking about here. And it's because it's something from deep within that we can't put in there ourselves. And that's, to me, that's the issue with joy, is that, and so it goes to me a little bit to that theologian Charles Taylor that wrote this ridiculously hard to comprehend book several years ago about it was about the current age that we live in, and the secular age. I think that was the name of it, something like that. And he talks about how culture has shifted to try to assess worth, that we have made the highest value of anything within ourselves, that human beings find the greatest value and worth and power within themselves. And he said that's a shift. It used to be that we found greatest worth outside of ourselves, something that was transcendent. And see, I think we're trying to do the opposite now in our culture, especially. I think we're trying to stuff joy like into our hearts by what we can get and experiences that we can do. I mean, and I think our culture right now, especially the younger generation, millennial and Gen Z and all this stuff, they're not as much about stuff, but they are very much about experiences. How can I experience life, and what experiences can I get? But I still think that's just another way of the other generation of trying to buy happiness, so to speak. And the struggle is that we're trying to gain joy and value and worth from our external sources. And the only way that it can truly be given to us is from the inside. And we can't do that. Only God can do it from the inside. Only the spiritual reality can bring that joy from the inside. It can't be from a material reality from the outside in. And it's a weird and complex, hard challenge.
Yeah, man, that it goes back to the Emmanuel. God,
Yes.
God is with us.
Yeah. God with us and God in us.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's beautiful. And
well,
so challenging.
Yes. That's again, and that's when those shepherds made that declaration, we bring good news of great joy. And then James gives us that different perspective on, okay, here's what joy is. And it's both simple and so difficult. Well, hey, it's 10 o'clock. I've got an appointment I've got to run here too soon. So
all right. All right. Well,
thank you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for sharing on Sunday. That was so good. And it makes me angry watching you guys, how comfortable you are in front of a camera. So fireside chat. That was just really great. Really great.
With a lot of editing. So just FYI.
Well, maybe I need to learn how to edit better, because that was good.
Hey, thank you very much, Tim. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks. This is good for me. I love these conversations.
Yeah. All right.
Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Take care.